Everything shared here is for educational purposes and personal reflection only, not medical advice. Always work with your own healthcare provider for individual care. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Inner Script podcast. I have a really fun guest here today. I am joined by Connie Kulczycki. She is the author of No Longer Here, deeply personal exploration of identity, relationships, and the courage it takes to rebuild your life after everything you thought defined you falls apart. Through the lens of 3 pivotal relationships, so relatable, Finance Man, G.I. Joe, and McDreamy, Connie reflects on the ways love, betrayal, and self-discovery can dismantle the roles we've been playing and push us toward a more honest version of ourselves. Connie has also been a digital nomad for the last 8 years and is currently in Brazil, right?
Yes.
Love it. Okay. And I also want to name how I found Connie because I think it's a really funny story, but this isn't why she's on here, but it kind of led to this connection getting formed, which I think is just, it's very funny. So back in the fall, Connie, where I follow this woman, modern astrologer Lauren O'Connell, I meet with her for astrology readings, and Lauren posted a picture of her and Connie on her Instagram. And I was like, why does this girl look familiar? So I clicked Connie's Instagram and I realized she was the ex-girlfriend of someone I briefly dated years ago. At the time when I was seeing this person, she was on his Instagram. So as one does, you stalk the ex-girlfriend. I mean, what's not more relatable than that? So I was like, oh, cool. And I saw that she was publishing a book, which I was like, great for her. Went on with my day. And then a few months later, she showed up in my discovery page and talking about her book. And I'm just like, I kind of feel called to read this because it's so relatable. We've all been there, the heartbreak, the love, betrayal, all the things. So that's how I found her. But that's not why she's on here talking about that whole thing. She's on here to talk about her whole experience. So happy that you came on. Love that you're here.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so thrilled to be here. It's kind of a dream come true, honestly. This is my first official podcast since being a published author, and I didn't know where to take my book. I just published in January as a first-time author, as an indie author, as not really knowing what I'm doing. I've been kind of throwing everything at the wall and just trying to figure out what to do. And you showed up in my DMs and I was like, you know what? This is it. This is where it's going to take me. And I think having that small world connection, and especially because the man in finance was someone who I talked about in my book, and he was the motivator behind becoming a digital nomad. So I think it's an even cooler connection of how we got brought together. So thank you.
Of course. And, when I was kind of toying with the idea, honestly, to tell you, but I'm like, no, that's lacking transparency. And also it's like, who cares at the same time? And I knew you'd be cool with it. I kind of got a feel of your vibe. I feel like very intuitive person. I can tell, highly empathic. So I'm like, she'll get it. It's fine.
And also, that's what the book is about. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being upfront. It's about being, when you hide those things, then you're actually hiding your true self. And writing the book has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Publishing the book has been the second hardest thing I've ever done. And it's just really taught me that in every situation, it's how can I be the most open, honest, true version of myself. All the feedback I've gotten from the book has been, wow, how vulnerable is this? Wow, you're so raw in it. And that's what I want to inspire people to think about in their day-to-day, and not just with these big life things, but just showing up in a simple conversation with a girlfriend.
I'm so glad you phrased it that way, because we're so scared to show the messy parts of ourselves, but it's also it's the most relatable part of ourselves. That's why I loved your story so much, because you didn't hold anything back. I think also it goes to show where I'm in my life right now. I'm putting all of my shit out there right now. It just felt so real and authentic. And I think we need more of that in life. And I mean, I think the messy parts of ourselves are actually the most beautiful part. And I know that sounds so corny, But it's like it really brings you into growth. You have to kind of identify those aspects of yourselves that are no longer her.
I think it's those messy parts. Like, I never would have written this book, and I know we'll get into it a little bit more, but I wrote this book coming out of one of the worst heartbreaks I've gone through thus far. And if I hadn't gone through that, yes, maybe I would have written a book in the future, but would it have been as powerful? Would it have been as raw? Would it have been what it is if that hadn't happened? And I don't think so. And of course, I don't wish anyone to go through terrible heartbreaks. It's not fun, but how can you alchemize that situation into something more beautiful? Because I always reminded myself in any pain that I'm going through, the capacity that I'm able to hold that pain on the opposite side of the spectrum is the capacity I can have joy. And every time I get a little bit deeper in my pain and in my grief, everything is blowing up. I know that on the other end of it is so much joy, so much happiness, things that I could not even imagine to be possible. And that's what this book was for me.
No, and it's such a beautiful story. And you are a very gifted writer. Like, I felt like I was on that journey with you.
That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be like two girlfriends chatting over coffee and just deep in the story. I didn't want it to be lessons. I wanted it to be, how do you see yourself? And like, how can you reflect back on your life on those pivotal moments? Where have you taken it? Where do you want to go? How can I inspire other people? Yeah, we so often hide those messy parts, and I hid them the majority of my life. I'm a very dramatic. I love to be like, I want to be, but I hid it my whole life. And then I'd like go cry in the corner and no one would actually know I was upset. But that's also the best part of me is how can I turn it into this crazy story? Because now, if I'm being dramatic, it's because I'm just trying to tell my story in a funny way that engages people.
Let's get into it. I'm really excited to dive in. So, your book is called No Longer Her. Before we talk about the relationships in the book, Finance Man, G.I. Joe, and McDreamy. So who was that her you realized you were no longer? Many versions?
I've gone through 1,000 iterations of myself, and small ones and big ones. And I think the book documents the really big ones. But that version of myself was the people-pleasing version, the one that my parents, and no wrongdoing to them, but my parents, my family, my friends, my teachers, just who you grow up around, they had this vision of who I was supposed to be and who I was supposed to grow up into. And I just realized that that was not me at all. And that version of me really, really wanted to explore, but didn't know how to, didn't understand how to break out of the mold. When I go back and read those first couple chapters of my story, I'm like, oh my gosh, who is that girl? She's so scared. And now it's like, you could ask me to do anything. And yeah, okay, what time? What day? Let me schedule that around my meeting, but sure, I'll be there. It's so easy. Whereas back then, I wanted to say yes to all of it, but I didn't know how to. I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the confidence for it.
And that makes total sense. And you really portray that very beautifully in your story. I mean, let's kind of get into those specific relationships. You describe in your book relationships as mirrors. When you look back at Finance Man, G.I. Joe, and McDreamy, what did each relationship reflect back to you about who you were at that stage of your life? Because it's such a relatable thing. I think if anyone listening looks back at their different relationships, myself included, and you're like, WTF, like what?
What was going on there? What was I thinking? I'm confused.
But that's all part of it. Like you have to go through it to literally get out of it.
You aren't just born with the knowledge. You have to go through these experiences to understand. And I also think part of it is are you willing to look in the mirror? And I know for the longest time I wasn't willing to. It was until I could not look at myself. It came to the point where, a little spoiler alert in the first chapter, but the man in finance ended up cheating on me and I broke up with him and I became a digital nomad. If he hadn't done that, and he had done it multiple times, but it was that last time that like really broke the camel's back. It was that girl that was too scared to say yes to herself. That was my biggest mirror. At that time, that final time, I remember I woke up after having a dream that I knew he had cheated on me. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, this is your moment. Are you going to say yes to yourself? And I knew that I had to, no matter how scary it was. And so that was the first time that I was actually able to say, okay, we're going to do something differently. We thought we were supposed to get married to our high school sweetheart. That obviously didn't happen. So let's get married to our college sweetheart. This isn't going to happen anymore, and that's okay. And you have to put that fairy tale that you thought you were supposed to have away. So I said yes to myself with him. With G.I. Joe, that one was all about, I mean, there was a lot there, but I think that one was really about control and still trying to somehow fit into the mold that I thought I was supposed to have. But I still wasn't quite there. Like, how can I spin it a little bit to make it my own and control it to be my own? And how could I also at the same time just be the most angry, resentful version of myself because I wanted to control it? But obviously, when you try to control something, it never works. So with G.I. Joe, it was definitely all about control. And then with McDreamy, it was like almost swinging to the other side. And how far can I push the envelope? What can I do that still is like true to me, but is unconventional for the rest of the world? And that was really about finding my boundaries, because with McDreamy, we were in an open relationship the first 2 years of our relationship. And with some people, I could talk about it, but my friends from college, I didn't feel quite safe enough because that's not the route that they went. And so it was really just, what am I comfortable with and where do I actually want to go? And as soon as I got out of the relationship with him, when I was going through that breakup, I sat on that question so much. Like, am I meant to be in a one person relationship? Am I meant to be in a monogamous relationship? All these questions, I realized like, yes, but I also still need to have a relationship that completely pushes my boundaries in every other way. And that container with the actual partner, I need to feel safe, and it needs to be just with him.
And that's so fair. We're going to get deeper, definitely, into, oh my gosh, the McDreamy. Like, that was gut wrenching for me to read. I want to go back because you mentioned about Finance Man. Like, you had this dream that he cheated on you, which is crazy. Like, I've experienced something like that too. But what about that? Because you mentioned it happened multiple times. What about that moment made it kind of different? Like, what was it like? Okay, this is like, what about that specific moment where you're like, all right, I am done?
I think at that point, we had been together for about 5 years at that point, and we had been living together. We were going on, I think, our third year of living together. We were in the city. I was on my second job already, and I had just graduated college 2 years prior. So, like, 2 jobs in 2 years. Everything was being shaken up. It just, none of it felt right. I felt like I was just caged in living someone else's life. When I had the dream that you mentioned, I was at my parents' house for Memorial Day. We were doing like the whole barbecue. He was on a guy's trip in Nashville. I was sound asleep. I hadn't been talking to him a lot that weekend, so I was like a little anxious about it, but for some reason I was able to really fall asleep that night. And I had a dream that he cheated on me with this girl at a bar. And I did later found out who the girl was. I actually saw her in my dream as well, which is insane. Like, I feel like I actually saw the moment.
I was going to say you were having an out of body experience. You like transported.
100%. So I saw it actually happen. I sat up in bed and I was like, it's over. And then I fell back asleep. I literally just went right back down, like it didn't even happen. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, okay, it's done. Like, there's no other choice. You already said it out loud. And once I say something out loud, because I'm used to bottling things up, once I say it out loud, I can't not do it. So I said it out loud. And even though no one heard me, I heard me. And as hard as it was those next couple of weeks, moving out of the apartment and moving back in with my parents and actually breaking up with him and just having to go through all of those emotions, I had to do it for myself.
I think you said in one of the chapters something like at the end of the Finance Man chapter, you were like, so thank you, Finance Man. And it wasn't in a way of like shame. It was just like, actually, thank you. And I think that's just a beautiful thing, because I think many of us can hold on to that like anger and resentment of getting cheated on, but it's wonderful when it becomes kind of one of your biggest blessings. That line, it was just so like, it was so good. You just tied it into a bow. You're like, thank you so much.
I don't have regrets about how I wrote my book. There's a couple things I changed now just because your life is always evolving. And I wrote that book a year ago. I edited it 6 months ago. It's all very different than where I am now. I wish I had thanked each of my partners at the end of their mini story because I loved that part of the ending of that chapter. And I wish I had done that for all of them. So this is my little, if anyone's listening, if any of you are listening, thank you. I wouldn't be here without you.
And I think it's good to kind of name this too. Like, we're talking about these people, and it's not like shaming them in any way. That's not what we're doing here. So I think it's just, we're all here for a different reason. We've all made mistakes. We all contribute in relationships. It always takes two people to tango. This isn't about blame or shame. It's just kind of like your story. And I think you definitely explained that in the book. It wasn't any like shaming at all. So I just want to like say that because you did do that beautifully. It's just like, this is my story.
I know, it was very much because it's hard when you're talking about relationships. There's two people in it, and I'm the one person writing it, and it's all from my perspective. And that's something I'm a lot more conscious of now, especially when people are like, oh, what happened with X, Y, and Z, or just even friendship situations. Now I'm always like, this is my perspective. This is what happened. There's always two sides to the story and one truth. So take that as you will. And I think it's really important to name that, especially when you're writing a book that is nonfiction.
Let's talk about the marriage to G.I. Joe because there was so much going on there.
I laugh because it's crazy. I look back on that time and I'm like, what was I doing? I'm still tired from that time. And that was 6 years ago. I'm exhausted.
I could feel it reading it. Like, you did such a good job. So you met him and it kind of felt like this whirlwind. He was kind of the picturesque guy, perfect on paper, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth. So
I met him and he was like my savior. And it's hard now because obviously it's all in hindsight. But I very quickly fell in love with him. And that's also something about me. I very quickly fall in love with people. I'm a Libra. I'm a lover. What do you want from me? Like, I'm ruled by Venus. Like, I just love it. So I very quickly fell in love with him. He could not have been more different than the man in finance. And to me, that was okay, he's the one. He must be because this was the one I was supposed to marry. I thought I was going to. And now here's my knight in shining armor, and he's in the military. How romantic. Now I can have my cake and eat it too. He can be traveling, he can be deployed, and I'll be traveling. And then when he's here, I'll pretend to be the perfect housewife. It couldn't be better. And it was great. I'm not going to say that it wasn't amazing, but in hindsight, it was, yeah, I fell in love with him because I had 1 weekend a month with him. And how can you not fall in love with someone when you have limited time with them? And then throw in deployments and the story behind a military relationship. Just growing up in the US, I feel like we kind of romanticize that and we forget how hard it is to be with someone that you don't actually see, that you don't actually talk to, that you might get one email a day from, and try to keep a relationship alive. And the reunitations that you see on the TV or in the news, they're beautiful. They are heartfelt. I will cry at every single one that I still see because how can you not? But then you're with that person all the time and you haven't been with them for months. And that reintegration, I didn't realize how hard it would be. I remember the first time G.I. Joe came back from a deployment. Once we got married, and then once I moved to Virginia, he was on his first deployment, and I had my dog Lou with me in Virginia, and he came back, and he walked in the house and like, said hi to me, did the whole thing, said hi to Lou. And Lou was so pissed at him that she ran from the front entryway into our bedroom, sat on top of his pillow, and he like followed her into the bedroom trying to get a hug. She looked at him and peed directly on his pillow as a little FU. Like, you just left me and you come back and this is how you think you can treat me? Absolutely not. I think that story is a perfect synonym for just how hard it is.
So hard to be away from each other. So when did you realize it wasn't it?
Okay, there were many small moments. I would say, though, the biggest one, the one where it was like hitting me over the head, was 2 weeks before our wedding. He had just gotten back from a deployment and he had proposed to me on national television, like officially had proposed to me. We were on CBS Good Morning America. The whole thing, so romantic, amazing. How like every girl's dream. I was sitting there and I was like, this is not what I want. But the wedding is 2 weeks away and I just dumped all of my savings into this. And I'm like looking at him and I'm like, wow, this man is so in love with me and so kind and would do literally anything for me. And I don't want to be with him. And shortly after that, we had some really like deep conversations about how we wanted to take our life since we were getting married in 2 weeks. And I found out he was in a lot of debt. And in that moment, finances were very, very important to me. They still are, but not to the same extent that they were. This was me trying to control the situation, obviously. And he was in a ton of debt, but he didn't realize he was. And we had had this conversation before, and I was like, how can I marry someone who doesn't know that they're in debt? I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. I just paid for a whole wedding and I shouldn't be doing this. And there were a ton of little moments. So we got married 2 weeks afterwards. Obviously, I walked down the aisle, we did the whole thing. And also, as we were saying our vows, I'm just also remembering this moment. As we were saying our vows, I couldn't look him in the eyes. I was like, this isn't the person. This isn't who I want to be with. And I remember I kept like looking off to the side. I was like, why am I looking to the side? Like, the person I should be talking to. There was a bunch of little moments after that. I'd say another really big one was when we went on our honeymoon to Brazil, ironically. And we sat down at a cafe when we first arrived, and he was just so American in that moment. And being someone who had traveled a lot and he really hadn't, I got the ick and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And I was like, oh no, what do I do? We're on our honeymoon in Brazil. What do I do?
I haven't been married, but I've been in situations where it's just like all of a sudden, it's like subtle that you know you're not supposed to be with somebody, but then all of a sudden it's like, ugh, and it's just like this constriction and it's so uncomfortable. I feel like many people can relate to that.
It's an unfortunate thing to relate to, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think it's like, I'm just so glad you share that in your book because I feel like a lot of people kind of do feel that in their relationship or even a marriage. You know, it doesn't mean you have to stay in it. And I know that's like such a hot take. And obviously, there's situations to work on it and work it out. But it's like if you are feeling that like misalignment in your relationship, it's just an opportunity to listen, is I think the point there. But so eventually you guys both go to Japan, right? That was during like COVID, from what I remember. Okay. And I mean, that was like a very dark period of time for you.
I would say it was probably one of my darkest periods of life.
Yeah. Reading that was like tear jerking. Like, where were you at that point? Were you just kind of like going through the motions?
So at that point, I want to back up a little bit because another point that I had realized that I wasn't supposed to be with him was a couple months prior to moving to Japan. He was deployed and I went on this program called Remote Year. I'm traveling, I'm living my best life. And he officially deployed like once I had already gone on the trip. And that day I could feel the weight lift off of my shoulders. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. Why am I feeling that way? And then from that point on the trip, I felt like I was actually myself. I felt like I could actually be present. I felt like I could actually just live and do what I wanted to without the constraints of him. And about a month and a half after that, I cheated on him. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, yeah, okay. I'm really like, what am I doing here? What am I doing in this relationship? But at that point, he was deployed and I can't send an email to a man stuck on a ship in the middle of nowhere and say, hey, by the way, it's over. So then COVID hit and his deployment got extended and he ended up coming back later that summer. So I think at that point it was 8 or 9 months that we had been separated. And so I was going through the guilt, the shame, the processing, the trying to turn around the blame and put it on him for my infidelity. And then also just processing like what happened there. And I do think in the book, I don't expand on that time period of my life as much as I think is due. And I think that's a whole other book that's going to be coming because I processed so much. I was so mean to G.I. Joe in that time period because I tried to take all the blame off of myself and put it on him. And I think that was also one of my biggest mirrors during that relationship is how I can manipulate my partner and take everything off of my plate and make it their fault and make it all about them. And they're the one who made me do this. And it's their responsibility. And I'm the perfect person, which isn't true and was a huge learning for me. And also the hardest thing that I learned out of that relationship. So I'm processing all that. And then he comes back from deployment and then we have to go to Japan because he gets moved. And when I was in Japan, I didn't see him. I was working US hours, so I was working overnight and he was working during Japan daytime. So I wasn't seeing him. I was cranky. I was sleeping like 2 to 3 hours a night. And that is when I realized how important sleep is to you. I always knew it was, but not how important it was. And I hit a level of depression that I don't even know how to put it into words. It was so dark all the time. All I wanted to do was either sleep, which I couldn't do because I was so wired. I was so sad. I was so out of my schedule. I was just so unhappy. So I wasn't sleeping even more, or I just wanted to drink. And it just created the worst version of myself that really had me contemplating, why am I here? What's the point? If this is what my life is supposed to be, if this is what my marriage is supposed to be, I do not want to be here. I do not want this. And I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to disappoint everyone in my life by choosing myself. It took literally another strain of COVID to pull me out of the country. It was something that I couldn't even make the choice for myself. I mean, I made the choice to leave, but it was because something else happened. It wasn't because I was strong enough in that moment to do it for myself. So I'm also a little bit thankful for COVID in that moment, even though it was terrible. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but like,
Here's the thing, like, look, the universe always has our back. You know, if we were always strong enough to pull us out of a situation, none of us would maybe be in our situations right now. So, you know, we're in a relationship with ourselves and the universe. So, look, we've all been there. But I mean, that's what like allowed you to get out of, you wouldn't make that mistake again, you know? I don't want to say mistake because there's no such thing as mistakes. Yeah, I mean, you sharing the infidelity in the book was so, number one, brave. And also, I think in my mind, when I was reading it, I feel like you were taking accountability and responsibility. And what I was like, the kind of screaming, I was like, give yourself some grace, give yourself compassion, because there was just so many, like you were literally like, just doing your best. I think, you know, with infidelity, it's not so black and white. And look, this is coming from somebody I have been cheated on as well. I just think it's not so black and white. And there's comes in, I don't believe in the line, you know, once a cheater, always a cheater. I truthfully don't believe that. But, you know, with that infidelity part, like how were you able to give yourself compassion at that point? Because you, in my mind reading this, I was like, you were so hard on yourself. And, you know, obviously infidelity is never justified, but what I always say, there's always reasons behind our behaviors. So let's try to understand them and then give ourselves compassion. So how were you able to do that?
it took me a really long time. And I want to say, honestly, up until about a year or two ago, I was not able to fully give myself compassion. And that first year afterwards, I wasn't able to talk about it with people who were like past Connie friends and past Connie connections. Anyone that I met moving forward from that relationship, I was able to talk about it, but it was almost in a self-deprecating way. Yeah, I was such a terrible human. I cheated on my husband. And it was like in that, like trying to put it off, I still wasn't giving myself compassion for it. And I was able to say, yes, I was in a really hard position, but I couldn't feel it yet. And it took going through another relationship and just honestly time. It's interesting that the forgiveness for myself also kind of followed the timeline of forgiveness that you have with a partner after you break up with them, or if you have a really bad friendship breakup, or just with leaving a job. It followed that same grief timeline in a different way, of course. And it was also, it felt a lot harsher because it was for myself. And I hold myself to such a high standard. And I don't know why I did that. And I know why I did it. But in that time, I was like, why would you do that? How could you let yourself do that? And compromising my values, I just could not forgive myself for it. And it took me a while.
And I think it's helpful too to kind of spin this, because I think self-forgiveness can be so hard because many of us are so hard on ourselves. But like if a friend of yours had done that exact same thing, he would have been like, dude, forgive yourself. I understand. Like, that was hard. It's okay. Like, you hadn't seen your husband for 8 to 9 months. You felt this misalignment. Your heart was breaking already. You were grieving this life you thought you were going to have. Like, you were just doing your, like, kind of your best at that time. and kind of trying to show up for yourself at that time.
It's a hard lesson. And I think I can't say, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't tell the future. I hope I never do that again. I hope I never compromise my values in that specific way again. But I'm sure I'm going to let myself down in a different type of way. And I'm sure it's going to hit in the same way. But can I give myself compassion through it better and quicker and forgive myself and hold myself through it? Give myself grace, because we are just humans and we are just living life for the first time, figuring it all out as it happens. And I know I used to think the adults have it all figured out, but somehow I'm an adult and I do not have it figured out.
No one has it all figured out, and we never will. That's the thing.
Exactly. And that's what we have to remind ourselves of, that it's how can you show up the best way possible in every single situation day to day? And that doesn't mean that you don't have hard moments and you don't have hard weeks and hard months, because that's unrealistic. Of course you are. But can you still be like, hi, I'm still going to smile today. I'm going to be thankful for one small thing, even if it's just the sun shining on my face, and just take it one step at a time, one day at a time.
That's beautifully said. So how did G.I. Joe finally kind of take, because you realized that it wasn't it, you guys had that conversation. How did he take the breakup? Pretty much.
So we broke up when I was actually in Colorado and he was still in Japan. So it was over FaceTime. We had not seen each other in a couple months. We had barely communicated over those couple months that we were separated. I remember just watching his face just break down on FaceTime. But I could also see that it was, he knew like, this is what's going to happen. This is the best for both of us. And we didn't really talk much after that. It was very logistical. All my things were still in Japan. He had my birth certificate and my grandma's wedding ring and my graduation ring, like all the important stuff. It was very logistical. And we had a couple text conversations and that was about it. I mean, of course, like, we hear things about what happens with our exes. I've heard that he's good. I hope that he's well. I hope he is having the best of his life. But it wasn't like an official closure. But I also think now, after going through that, I think closure is bullshit. It's something we make up in our heads. And yes, we want it, because of course we want it, but it doesn't exist.
You're never going to not leave a conversation with an ex without a question. So I've never really believed in closure. You really create it for yourself. I also want to say too, like, I think what people can struggle with when they're getting broken up with, there can be so much anger towards the other person, but it's just a reminder that, like, the person who's doing the breaking up with is hurting a lot too. And there's also dealing with the sadness, the heartbreak, but also the guilt of hurting somebody. So I think people can relate to that, where you're kind of taking on the anger and the blame and the guilt of ending the relationship, when just know the other person is really just trying to do what's best for not only them, but you. So just want to say that.
I agree, because I do think younger version of Connie, she forgot, she knew there was another person on the other side of the relationship, but sometimes she forgot that there was actually a person on the other side feeling things, and they might not be hurting in the same exact way, but they were hurting in their own way. And just because it wasn't the same exact as me doesn't mean that it was invalid and doesn't mean it wasn't true. I forgot that a lot, and I made it all about me. And maybe that's because I'm an only child. That might come through in those moments. But that was a hard lesson I needed to learn.
We've all been there, being broken up with, and then you're the one doing the breaking up with, and you're like, oh my God, like, this is hard. And I could argue, like, I certainly don't think it's easier. I think it's just harder in a different way. And sometimes, like, you don't have the anger that's motivating you to kind of move on in a sense. You're kind of just, in my experience, I was like stuck in limbo for a little bit when I have been in that situation, because I had so much guilt over hurting somebody. So, okay, moving on to McDreamy. Oh gosh, such a soul karmic connection. So the way you even describe, I don't know how I remember this. My memory is like ridiculous sometimes. When you were at this yoga retreat and he was the host of the yoga retreat, right? And you're like in this class and he like walks in and it's just like you lock eyes and it's like you just, it's almost like you guys recognized each other. That's the definition of a karmic soul contract, if anybody has not experienced that in their life.
Let me tell you, separating from those. Oh my God.
So, okay, talk about like, what were you feeling when you saw him?
I feel like the world stopped, honestly, when I saw him. And I had weeks before started, it was a couple months after G.I. Joe and I had decided we were getting divorced. And even though we weren't officially divorced because of just legal things and how you have to file and blah, 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 I was ready to potentially start looking at dating again. I was like, maybe we can start toying with it. And I had in my journal a couple of weeks prior started listing out what that person looked like, what he made me feel, what we did together, what that next version of my relationship would be. And I don't know, I saw him, the world stopped, and I was like, oh, okay, here he is. That's terrifying. I don't even know this person. I don't even know his name. And as I got to know him over that next week, and then as we start to get to know each other over the coming months, it was so hard to deny that he wasn't that person. Like he was, and I could very clearly feel, and this is when my intuition really started kicking in, but I like to deny her. Like she didn't actually know what she was talking about. I would feel her. I'd be like, no, 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 I know best. So I could see how he could be the person, but I could also see that he still had stuff that he needed to work through that wasn't going to show up as what I needed. And so I really struggled with that fight because I fell in love with him very quickly, as I do. And I wanted to tell him, I wanted to explode all over him and be like, I am the rainbows and butterflies and hearts and pink and let's get married tomorrow. And I couldn't do that. And that felt like a disservice to myself. And as our relationship progressed, his avoidance just came out more and more and more. And he did eventually tell me that he loved me, but then we went weeks without saying it again. And I was like, what is going on? Is this a test? Do I need to stay patient? Or is this a test that I need to stand up for myself again? But he gave me this path of how can I keep pushing boundaries and what I want a perfect relation, quote unquote, perfect relationship to look like, that I was like, no, I want to keep exploring this, even if it ends up hurting me.
No, and I think very relatable. I think all of us can have been in a situation like that. But you mentioned in the early, like the first 2 years you guys were in an open relationship. Was that something you were like interested in exploring at the same time? Like, kind of, how did you guys come to that agreement?
So when I had been with G.I. Joe, I know that I had started to kind of explore it because with a military relationship, obviously you don't see your partner very often. And so I was like, is this an option for us? And then just realized he's just such a sweet baby angel of a soul that it would never work with him. So I never brought it up. But then I cheated on him and I was like, well, shit, like, am I not meant for monogamous relationships? Should I actually explore this? And the fact that I was thinking about it and then I met McDreamy and that was something that he also brought up that he was thinking about, I was like, okay, well then this could work. Let's explore it together. In that phase of my life, I was also coming out of, with the man in finance, I was a very anxious attachment style. With G.I. Joe, I was a little more avoidant. So I was trying to find my center of being more secure in my relationships. So exploring that, exploring open relationships with McDreamy, I was like, oh, this can be the more secure version of myself. Like, how can I step into that when I know that there's a potential that he's going on dates with other people, that he's sleeping with other people? Like, how can I show up secure in that and not be anxious about it? And then not get avoidant when I'm doing something similar and not tell him or not be open with him about it. So I was trying to find my happy medium because also, again, I'm a Libra. I like balance.
Of course, bring it back to astrology. It always makes sense.
It always makes sense. So with him, we had talked about it and we both had a lot of travels that were planned out and we didn't want to do long distance. Coming out of that relationship with G.I. Joe, I did not want to do long distance again. So it just kind of fell into place. It wasn't really like a discussion. It was oh, this just makes sense.
And then when did you guys finally, like, how did you guys have that conversation where it's like, okay, we're not exploring anybody else?
I don't know if we really had the conversation because I was too scared to ever like have it. But about a year into it, I found out. So I got a text or an Instagram DM from a random girl and she was like, hey girl. And I was like, oh, now I know what this means. And she explained that she had slept with McDreamy months ago and that she had just found him on Instagram and then saw our tagged photos together and realized that we had been together. And I was like, well, it's okay. We're in an open relationship, so don't feel guilty. There's no worry here. But he was supposed to tell her. So one of our rules, we had 4 rules. And the one that was the most important to me was telling the other person that they were in an open relationship. So he had to be honest. I had to be honest. And that was because I didn't want those texts. It was not because I want to control him in any way. I just did not want another hey girl text because I got so many with the man in finance, and it just scarred me. It scarred me. So that was about a year into it. And at that point, I was like, well, I don't want to be open anymore. This just doesn't make sense for me. We're also spending all our time together. At that point, we had been traveling full time together for 4 months. So who else was he going to be with? Why don't we just close the relationship? Conversation, I said that I didn't want it anymore, but we never really closed it. And then for the next year, we never really had the official conversation. And then at some point I was like, okay, we're closed. And he was like, okay, this isn't still really what I want, but I'll try it for you. And then that's how the last year of our relationship ended.
So during that time, because you guys were together for 3 years, okay, you guys did do a lot of travel, and then I'm trying to remember where you guys were, but then you started having this rash, right? This was with McDreamy, right? Because on this podcast, we talk a lot about physical symptoms, how it's very emotional, unprocessed emotions. You mentioned other symptoms you've had with GI Joe, the UTIs, which so relatable. And then with McDreamy, you were having this rash. What do you think you were not processing at the time?
So I think a lot of it was at that time we were so go, go, go. And I would just book more stuff. I would book another flight to a new country. I'd book another Airbnb. I'd book another trip. I just kept us going so that we didn't have time to sit down and have a real conversation. And I'm the type of person, so I've had scoliosis since I was, I don't know, 10. They told me that I first had it. They said I have all sorts of things on my back. So I have a very high pain tolerance. So I need something to knock me on my ass in order to sit down and slow down and actually think. And I think these rashes that I was getting was my body being like, can you please sit down? Can you please stop? Can you please sit and actually face what's going on? And it's what's going on with work. It's what's going on with McDreamy. It's what is your life turning into that you just keep booking more and more and not facing and not being present. I was living so far in the future that I wasn't present with my actual life. And I was doing all these amazing things. That first year of travel, I think we went to 14 countries, and we were on a plane almost every week. And it was amazing. It was beautiful. We were seeing so many great things, but I wasn't actually experiencing them. I was just looking forward months ahead to that next trip we were going on.
Do you think it was because were you running away from something?
Totally. I was trying to outrun that version of me before the man in finance that I didn't know who I was. And obviously I had evolved along the way, and I was a different version of self at that time. But at the end of the day, I was still running. I was running from who I needed to be, who I wanted to show up as in that relationship, my actual needs in that relationship. I didn't know how to communicate them. I thought him and I had really good communication because we had started off being able to be so open about our relationship and how we wanted it to look. But when it came down to, oh, this isn't what I want anymore, I couldn't voice it.
It's hard because it's kind of what you were saying earlier. Once you say something out loud, you have to kind of face it.
Exactly. And so I kept it in. So then my body was like, hello, fine, we'll put it on your body. We will write it on your body.
Looking back on that relationship with McDreamy, is there anything else you would have done differently? I don't like to say regrets, because I truly think we're meant to go through everything we do, but
I agree. And I think that's what's really hard about it. I ask myself this all the time because I did spend 3 years with him, and at the age that I'm at, and I'm not saying, because I don't think I'm old. I think I'm in my prime. I don't even think I've hit my prime, honestly. She's still coming. It's just something you have to think about as a woman. Where do you want your life to go? I think I was still very lost, and I didn't know how to ground in that moment. And I wish I would have taken just a couple more moments for myself to ground and be like, is this actually the direction I want to go versus just doing it? And I think I was just in such go, go, go mode that I didn't have that time to do it. And I wish I would have given it to myself.
What do you feel like was the biggest lesson from McDreamy?
Honestly, I would say it's in the breakup, yeah, we broke up. We already spoiled that. But in the breakup, I actually let myself process it. With every other relationship, I jumped into the next one almost immediately after. I never processed. So I actually allowed myself to go through the full grieving process. And I would still say I'm going through it. I think the full grieving process is about 3 years long. And it's obviously in a very different way year to year. And it doesn't mean you can't move forward in a different relationship. It doesn't mean you can't move forward with your life, but it's how is it showing up and how is your body reacting to it? Because that kind of grief, it doesn't just leave your body. It needs time to work out. You have to process so much. And it's not just in those immediate months. It takes a lot of time. So I think that is my biggest lesson. And I'm so proud of my grieving process. Like I look back on it and I'm like, that was really hard. And that was so beautiful. And I'm so proud of myself for letting myself go through it.
Just that whole ending of your guys' relationship was really tough to even read because you could, I felt the love between you two. There was that period where you guys kind of took a break, weren't talking, and then eventually had the conversation to end the relationship. And then you guys both ended up in Costa Rica. And then it was pretty fresh out of the relationship, and you kept kind of running into him. Like, my heart was in my stomach. I was like, how were you there? Like, how did you do that?
I have no idea. I look back on it and I'm like, how did you show up? Because those first couple of weeks when we were in the same small town, it's about 2 to 3,000 people. And of course, it was during high season. So there's a couple thousand extra, but it is a small town. There is one main road. You run into each other every day. Like it is impossible not to. Those first couple of weeks, I didn't see him somehow. And I was just on edge though the whole time. I was constantly anxious. And I made sure during that time period, and even just like following the breakup and the immediacy after it, I made a really, really good morning routine. Like my morning routine is just like incredible. A plus, like no notes. And I made sure to ground myself and support myself as much as possible before I even stepped out into the world every single day. And that helped me so much because eventually I did run into him and I kept running into him. And I had to figure out how can I show up as my best self and not let him affect me. And at some point, he like wore me down, and it was very much like I got very resentful. I ended up laying in bed for a couple of days with my windows drawn, like crying, eating cake in bed, not able to function, because that's part of the process. And if I would have avoided that, then it would have come back tenfold. And who knows why it would have popped up, because then it just pops up at the most random of moments that doesn't make sense.
So you just have to kind of go through all of the emotions, feel your feelings, process it all. So you said you're still kind of in the grieving process. I mean, you've obviously made huge strides, happy where you're at, but how would you say you're still kind of grieving it? Have you seen him since or talked to him since the book came out?
So I haven't seen him since Costa Rica last year when he left town. So that was, I think, in April. Maybe it was May, somewhere around that time frame. And then at some point bought a place in Denver, and then I sold it this last May. And I had posted about it on my Instagram story. He replied and I was like, you do not belong here. So I blocked him on everything, including Spotify, including Venmo, like you name it, he was blocked. I was like, this man cannot have any access to my life. He is not allowed. He is done. And so I went through that, and then a couple months ago, I kept getting these little intuition pings, and they were like, it's time to unblock him. And so I would sit with that and I'd be like, okay, why do I want to unblock him? Is something happening in my life that, like I posted on my Instagram story, that something's really happy and I want him to see it? Or is it when the book first got released, I was like, am I doing this because I want him to see that I succeeded? And I really had to sit with that. I'd say like a month ago, I ended up unblocking him on everything because it got to the point where it felt heavier to have him blocked. Like it was actually making like a statement like, you still affect me, versus like, you actually have no control over my life anymore. And I sat with that for another day. And I was like, okay, are you sure? When I felt nothing in my body, there was no reaction. I was like, okay, it's time. Okay, that's great. And I did it. And he ended up texting me a couple weeks later, as I knew this man would. And it didn't even affect me. Like I saw his name on my phone. And of course I was kind of like, wait, interesting, but it didn't shake me like it had in the past or with any other relationship. You know, that gut, that, oh my God, that terrible, terrible feeling. I didn't have that. It was just a very, oh, that's weird that he texted me and let me answer and then it's done.
And that's kind of your closure in a sense. Like, there you go.
I know. I was like, oh, I feel great. This is wonderful.
So, where are you at in terms of living life, traveling? Where are you going next?
Okay, coming out of, so I finished the first draft of my book in April, and then it went to an editor in May. And somewhere in that, I was like, it's time to celebrate that I wrote a book. It's time to celebrate that I'm out of this relationship, that I'm kind of seeing the other side of it. And I'm not through it yet, but like I'm ready to be at this point. So I bought a ticket to Burning Man and I went to Burning Man this last year. And I was like, I am single. I have so much money. I'm going to be an author. I am going to travel the world. I'm going to do all the things that McDreamy didn't want to do with me because he said it was too much. And now I'm going to be too much because that's who I am. So I go to Burning Man and my best friend, she's Brazilian. She was born here and then she ended up moving to the US. And she's like, great, let's go, but we must go with a Brazilian group. And I was like, I don't care who we go with. I just want to go. So I was the token American in a group of Brazilians. I did not know any Portuguese. It sounded like alien speak to me when I showed up. Had no idea. I get to Burning Man. I have this amazing experience. And then I have this moment where I'm like, okay, I'm going to celebrate my book getting released in Brazil because my best friend wanted to go for the end of the year. And I was like, that's perfect. We'll have this huge party. So I had this whole plan. And then I met this man at Burning Man who's Brazilian. He ends up coming to Greece for my birthday. And then just like this whole, like crazy relationship, right? Then I get to Brazil in November. I was like, oh no, I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to live here. And I just I felt it in my gut. And I don't know how to explain it because none of it makes sense. I'm currently in a city. I'm not a city girl. It is the sixth biggest city in the entire world. There's no greenery. There's one park. The mountains are far. The beach is far. It doesn't make sense. But for some reason, I know I'm supposed to be here. And so I started the application for the digital nomad visa that will give me 2 years here. And then I got a CPF, which is basically our version of a social security number. So I am staying put for a little bit and seeing where that takes me. It's really interesting how it kind of all rounds out. We just finished up a 9-year for the Chinese New Year. So we're now in a 1 year, which is also interesting because I'm going on my 9th year of being a digital nomad. So it perfectly kind of circles with that. I also realized that my dog is turning 9. So she's also roped up in this. And so I feel like I had my 9-year crazy cycle. And now this is my next 9 years. And it's how can I make stability, but then also fulfill this adventurous travel side of me and have both? How can I make this perfect balance between the two?
I love that. So, are you still talking to the Brazilian?
We've had a whirlwind relationship.
I'm in San Francisco right now. I met a Brazilian, briefly went on a few dates. It was very he was not my person, but I'm like, this is a completely different way of doing things.
I do have to say, I will never date an American again. I'm so sorry. I can't. After this, I'm done. I'm done. I'm here.
I mean, yeah, that's all I'm going to say. It's just a different way of doing things. They're just very physical touch and I
know. And I love it so much. In all my relationships, I've always wanted to be more and I've always held myself more back. Brazilians they just put it on you. And you're like, okay, I love this. And that has inspired me, though, to also be more vulnerable in my relationships. And if I'm feeling something, I'm just going to tell you. I'm not going to hold back anymore because at the end of the day, I'm only hurting myself. If I don't say how I'm actually feeling, I'm never going to get what I want. It's just never going to happen.
Okay. So still just kind of figuring out.
Yeah. We broke up after Greece and then we got back together. Then we broke up again while I was here and then we reconnected and we're seeing where things go. And it's honestly the most beautiful thing. I've never been so present in a relationship and never been so, okay, so what's going to happen? Are we going to get married? Are we going to be official? What do I tell my friends? What do I do? I'm just so fully in the moment. And it has been my biggest mirror of a relationship. I feel like it's every single trigger, every single wound from every other relationship is showing up with him. And I have to look at it and be like, okay, do you really want this? Do you really want to grow? Do you really want to heal this wound? And if you do, there's something waiting on the other side, but like you cannot have it until you meet that. And it's been in that way. Yes, with him, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but like mentally for me, it has been the biggest roller coaster because it has been just like, I'm doing great. I'm so happy. I'm so in love. But oh my God, I hate myself and I hate what I'm doing and I don't know who I am. But let me come back up here and like, I'm so happy. And it's crazy. And I've never grown so much and like felt more myself than I do now.
I love that. Well, I'm intrigued to hear the rest of the stories. We're going to end on this final question. If someone listening to this conversation recognizes themselves in a relationship where they're having doubts in any way, what would you tell them?
First thing is I want them to be gentle with themselves. I want them to be kind. I want them to remember and remind themselves that we are all humans and that this is the first time we're here on earth and we are all just figuring it out. So give yourself a hug, a really big hug, and like let it go on for far too long. And then from there, I would want them to sit with themselves and ask what they really want out of life and how do they want the next steps to look, and do they want to be moving forward with this person in their lives or not? And there's no right or wrong answer. You cannot ask your best friend, you cannot ask your mom, you cannot ask your dad, you can't ask your mentor. You are the only person that has the right answer. And it took me so long to trust myself. It took me so long to trust my intuition, to actually listen to myself, that sitting with yourself first and getting to know yourself first is the most important step. And then you can take it out into your partner. And even if you're having problems with friends or mentors or work, it's all the same. It's coming back to yourself.
Perfect answer, because no one knows you better than you know yourself.
No, not a single person.
So we all need to give ourselves more credit and more grace. Okay, so we're going to close. Thank you so much for coming on. But where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at CKULLL. That's 3 L's. And then my website is mindbodyworld.co. My book is available directly on my website, or it is available on Amazon. There is an ebook version and then also a paperback version.
We'll put the information in the show notes so you guys can easily access where to get the book. Go to her website. Don't you have like offerings on your web? Am I making this up?
So I do. I have limited spots available for coaching, for one-to-one coaching, either bi-weekly or weekly. And then every once in a while, I do a pop-up meditation group. We just finished up a couple weeks ago as we were starting the new astrological year. And then also just like a hard right turn, I've been going to design school. So I've been doing embroidery and beadwork, and then I'm going to do some sewing classes. The goal is to make a couple outfits for Burning Man this year. And then for 2027, I want to do a small batch release of, I don't know yet. I'm still concepting, but she's coming out at some point and I'm saying it out loud. So now it has to happen.
I love it. That's so exciting. Well, you guys, buy Connie's book. You will be shook up, fall in love with it like I did. So relatable. And please let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at The Inner Script Pod. All information will be in the show notes if you want to find more out about Connie and buy her book, but I will chat with you guys next week. Thank you so much for coming on, Connie.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
If you want to connect with like-minded women and dive deeper into these conversations, join my Patreon community. There's a free option and it's where we can talk about each episode together. The link is in the show notes and I can't wait to see you there.